Hello everybody, in this new tutorial of Unity. So today we'll show you how to make the right joystick in order to turn and fire. So first of all, let's try to add a new joystick, new fixed joystick. So let's drag and drop it in the mission scene. So it will be called right joystick, and let's rename the other one to left joystick. So let's copy the component from the rect transform and call it on the right joystick, rect transform. So here let's select it, copy the component and select the other one and paste the component values. The same way we need to select the handle, copy the component and drop. Let's paste the component value. Now let's translate the right joystick to the right. So you select the right joystick, let's copy it, let's translate it. So here, now a little bit at the left. I think that's right. So now we need to add a new method, turn player. So when the right joystick is pressed, we need to turn the player. So let's define a new method, turn player. Let's press the Control key and the semicolon key at the same time. Visual Studio proposed to create the new method. So here we need to add a new public property type fixed joystick, which is called the right joystick. Now we need to define the compartment of the turn player. So here, if the right joystick is pressed, we need to calculate the new rotation in the right direction. So let's make the turn vector 3 is equal to new vector 3, and like last time we need to use the right joystick direction dot x and the right joystick direction dot y. Yeah. So now let's make the Cartesian. It's a Cartesian. So Cartesian, it's equal to new instance of Cartesian for the moment. So we need to add a rigid body property. So let's add a private property which is called rigid body type of rigid body, and in the start method we need to initialize this property. So here rigid body is equal to get component type of rigid body. So here we can get the rigid body of the current game object. So and here the Cartesian, it's equal to Cartesian dot look rotation of the turn vector. So after that we need to define the rigid body rotation to this to the right direction. So here we need to set the rigid body dot move rotation of the turn vector. I think no, it will be the move rotation of Cartesian. At the same thing, we need to set the transform rotation to the Cartesian, to the new Cartesian. So here we have transform dot rotation, it's equal to turn, now it's equal to Cartesian. It's equal to Cartesian. So we have many errors because we don't initialize the right joystick and the soldier script movement. So here let's select this game object and let's drag and drop the right joystick in the right place. Let's add a rigid body. We disable the use gravity and let's run the game. And here when I turn the right joystick, we move the player, we turn the player in the right direction. So here I have a surface pro we can touch directly by 2 fingers, and here we see the 2 joystick work correctly. So now we need to define the fire point method, the fire method. Let's add a new method which is called private void fire. And we need to add a new public property game object which is called Capsule prefab, which will be the Capsule prefab, and we need to add fire countdown property. Let's add a private property which is called fire countdown type float, and the fire rate. So eventually these 2 property permitted to calculate the fire rate. So let's initialize it to 0 at the moment, and let's add a new private float fire rate which is equal to 3 at the moment. Now let's add a new game object which is called fire point. This fire point, it will be the placement where we will instantiate the capsule. So now if the fire countdown is less or equal to 0, we can instantiate capsule game object. So let's add the game object which called capsule. It's equal to here we need to use the instantiate method, and we'll take the capsule prefab object, is the object to instantiate it, and we need to set the position and the rotation parameters. So here we need to use firepoint.transform.position, and the second one it will be the firepoint.transform.rotation. After that we need to set the fire countdown so that's great. Now we need to set the fire countdown, it will be equal to 1 float divided by the fire rate. So eventually in a real game the fire rate it will be player performance, so when we win a level we can upgrade this fire rate. So now we need to set the fire countdown, it's equal to the fire countdown minus the time dot delta time. So I think that's great. Let's call this fire method in the turn player. method. So here, if the right joystick is pressed, we can turn the player in the right direction and we shoot the enemies. Now let's drag and drop. So before that we need to create a sphere or capsule 3D object. We need to change the scale and change some dimensions in order to adapt it to the player view. So here we can change, resize it. So more a little bit, something like this. Let's set the position to the 0 and the 3 axis. After that we need to drag and drop it or translate it near the player in order to see how we'll adapt this capsule game object. So let's translate it. Near the player object. So something like this. Change the view. So let's change the scale to 80, 100 by 100, something like this. And now we need to change the rotation on the x-axis to 90 degrees. Yes, that's cool. So let's resize the dimensions by selecting the resize dimensions tools. Let's make more a little bit. Okay, now we need to define a new material in order to change the color. So let's create a new material. Which called capsule material. We change the color to the yellow, for example, or something like orange. We can change the smoothness metallic. After that, we drag and drop this material directly on the object on the scene. Here we can change metallic, smoothness, etc. So now let's create a new folder which is called prefab in the assets. Here we drag and drop the material and the capsule object to the prefab folder. And here, in order to have a model of capsule. So now let's change some scale here more a little bit. I think the X and the Y axis. Yeah, that's nice. On the Z axis, yeah. So I think we need to define the shader to UI default in order to get the UI default color. Here we have yellow without effects, so we can change it to something better like orange, yeah, something like this. So now we need to add a fire point, the place where we will instantiate this capsule prefab. So here we have in the hand right, we have something called weapon container. So we need to add an empty object. It will be the fire point. Let's make it at the center of the arm. So let's make sure this point, this fire point, is at the center in the different direction. So we can change the different views by selecting the right axis. So here I think that's great. So that's awesome. Let's translate it a little bit on the right. That's great. So here we need to initialize the capsule prefab and the fire point with the right object. Drag and drop it, and let's run the game. And here we have, when I pressed the right joystick, so here the capsule is not the right direction. We need to change the rotation on x-axis of the fire point. And here, when I press the right joystick, I have the capsule instance in the right direction. So now we need to define the movement script of the capsule. So we need to create a new script. I'm selecting capsule prefab, and let's add a new script which is called capsule movement. So in this capsule movement we need to update the position of the capsule when instantiated. Let's open the script, and here we need to add a speed parameter. So let's make it public property float speed. Eventually, when upgrading user or player performance in a real game, we can upgrade this speed in order to have more efficiency, fire rate or speed. So here we need in the update method to make the capsule translate on the y-axis -1 multiplied by the speed multiplied by the time delta time. So now let's run the game and see. So it doesn't work because I don't define the speed. Let's make 300 for example and see what we have here. So when I press the right joystick, we have the player shooting. Cool. So let's make 500 for example and see that the capsule movement will be more faster than, yeah. So let's try 900. Let's run the game. That's awesome. That's worked very nice. So that's all for today. I showed you how to make player turn with the right joystick and fire at the same time, so you can use the 2 fingers on Surface Pro computer. So that's very nice. Thank you very much.